She was inside her own home when strangers allegedly forced their way in and dragged her out. Not because a court ordered it, not because authorities confirmed anything, but because someone believed she looked like she didn't belong. And what makes this even more disturbing is the claim that her sister was pulled out of the shower completely naked, exposed in a moment where no one should ever have been inside that space. A private home, broken boundaries, and accusations that may not have even been verified. So the question is no longer just what happened, but how did it become acceptable for anyone to decide, on suspicion alone, who gets to stay in their own house? Stay with this story, because what unfolds here is not just about one incident. It is about a pattern that is starting to worry many people across communities. And before we go further, like this video and subscribe, because stories like this don't stay isolated for long. They spread, they escalate, and they shape how people treat each other on the ground. Now,
of when the marchers came in, what really happened and what she witnessed, in fact. Thank you so much for your time. You were telling us that your doors are broken at this point. What happened? Tell us the moment when the marchers came in.
What happened is that everyone just came in. As you can see, our gate is damaged. They just started saying us, we are Tsongas, we are South African Tsongas, but they started calling my daddy Kwere Kwere because he's Tsonga. At some point, they were taking him to the van to be deported. And I was like, my dad, he's not foreign national, he's a South African. They were like, we don't care, he's Tsonga. So they even went inside our houses, doors are broken. They even took my sister out of the shower while she was showering, naked. So we are saddened because it's also this peaceful march was not peaceful for us South African nationals. It affected our home, our sisters. My sister, she's traumatized now. So I'm saddened. I plead with the president to do something about this, because now where are we going to sleep? It's no longer safe for us to sleep. Our doors are broken, gates are broken. What's with our security?
Now here's where things start to matter. The young woman at the center of this case is reportedly identified as Tsonga. According to circulating accounts, she was accused of being a foreign national during a community confrontation that quickly escalated far beyond words. What should have been a verification process, if anything at all, turned into something far more intense. And this is the part few people are agreeing on. Some accounts say the confrontation started with questioning at her home. Others suggest there was immediate force used to enter the property. What is consistent across most reports, however, is that the situation did not remain calm for long. At some point, the situation escalated into her being removed from the house. And then comes the most disturbing allegation. Her sister was reportedly dragged out of the shower while completely naked during the chaos. That detail alone has turned this incident from a local dispute into a national conversation about dignity, boundaries, and abuse of power. But here's where things get disturbing, because this didn't appear out of nowhere. Before this incident, there were already tensions in the area around nationality, documentation, and belonging. Economic pressure and unemployment have been fueling suspicion in many communities, and that suspicion often turns into accusations without proof. So, when this confrontation happened, it didn't occur in a vacuum. It happened in an environment already primed for conflict. Now, according to the timeline being pieced together from multiple reports, the first moment of escalation began when individuals in the community allegedly identified the woman as a foreign national. The basis for that identification has never been clearly confirmed, and that is where the first major problem begins. Because identity, in legal terms, is not supposed to be decided by assumption. It is supposed to be verified. But in this case, verification allegedly never came first. Instead, confrontation came first. What followed was a rapid escalation. Witness accounts circulating online suggest that a group moved to her residence, questioning her status. That questioning allegedly turned into a forceful entry into the home. And once inside, the situation reportedly became chaotic. But here's where things take another disturbing turn, because instead of the situation being de-escalated or handed over immediately to authorities, it allegedly continued under community control for a period of time. That gap is one of the biggest unanswered questions in this case. Where were the authorities at that moment? And if they were aware, why didn't intervention happen earlier? As the situation unfolded, it reportedly drew attention from neighbors. Some supported the actions, believing they were protecting the community from undocumented residents. Others were shocked, arguing that what was happening crossed a clear line into intimidation and abuse. That split reaction tells us something important. This was not a unified action. It was a divided one happening in real time. And that division is often where situations become most dangerous. Because when no one fully agrees on what is right or wrong in the moment, escalation becomes easier. At some point, according to the allegations, the young woman was removed from the house. And this is where the core legal and moral questions begin. Was there any verified proof of her status before that happened? Was any lawful process followed? Or was perception enough to justify action? Because if perception becomes enough, then anyone can be targeted based on how they are seen. And that is not a small issue. That is a structural one. But the story does not end there. The claim that her sister was dragged from the shower while naked introduces a deeper level of concern about proportionality and restraint. Even in situations of legal enforcement, there are boundaries that are not supposed to be crossed. Privacy inside a home, protection of individuals during confrontation, and the obligation to avoid unnecessary humiliation. If those allegations are accurate, then those boundaries were not just crossed. They were ignored entirely. And this is where things get even more complicated. Because after the incident, information began spreading rapidly online. Clips, statements, and interpretations started circulating, each side framing the situation differently. Some users described it as community protection. Others called it unlawful intimidation and abuse. And once social media enters a case like this, the narrative stops being controlled by facts alone. It becomes controlled by emotion, interpretation, and bias. But here's what most people are missing in this debate. The legal truth is not decided online. It is decided through investigation, evidence, and accountability. And right now, many of those details are still unclear. There are unanswered questions about who initiated the confrontation, who authorized entry into the home, and whether any official intervention took place during the escalation. Those gaps are not minor. They are central to understanding whether this was lawful action or something entirely outside the law. And when those gaps exist, speculation fills them. Now, let's talk about the wider impact. Because incidents like this don't stay contained. They influence how communities view each other. They increase fear among vulnerable groups. And they deepen mistrust between residents and institutions meant to protect them. When people begin to believe that suspicion alone can lead to forced removal, the sense of safety inside homes begins to weaken. And once that breaks, it is very difficult to repair. Politically, cases like this place pressure on authorities to respond strongly, because silence is often interpreted as acceptance. But overreaction can also deepen divisions. So the response has to be measured, clear, and grounded in law. Public reaction has been sharply divided. On one side, there are calls for accountability, with many saying no circumstance justifies forced entry and humiliation inside a private home. On the other side, some argue that communities are reacting to broader frustrations around immigration enforcement and resource pressure. But regardless of perspective, one fact remains central. No verified legal process has been publicly confirmed as the trigger for what allegedly happened inside that home. And that is where the concern lies. Because without verification, actions become vulnerable to error. And errors in situations like this do not just affect systems. They affect people's lives directly. So what happens next will depend entirely on whether authorities formally investigate and establish a clear factual record. If investigations proceed, questions around legality, conduct, and accountability will need to be answered with evidence, not emotion. Witnesses may need to provide statements. Any available footage may be reviewed. And the chain of events will need to be reconstructed carefully. But even before that process concludes, the damage in public trust has already begun. Because now, many people are asking a deeper question. If someone can be removed from their own home based on suspicion alone, what protection actually exists for anyone when assumptions take over? And that is the part that should concern everyone watching this unfold. Not just what allegedly happened in this case, but what it signals for the future if nothing is clarified, nothing is addressed, and nothing is prevented from happening again. Because once fear becomes justification, the line between safety and harm starts to disappear. And when that line disappears, it rarely comes back easily.